Welcome to Workers and Resources Soviet Republic. In this video I'm going to give an overview of the 7 crosses custom map I've created for a Let's Play. Now this video will consist of 3 parts. The first part I'll give you reasons for why I actually created the map. The second part will be a little bit technical because I'll be talking about how I actually went about creating this map, because I've had a number of people request how I can explain how that process. And then in the final part I will give an overview of the map itself and what I can accomplish from it. Now if anyone wants to skip to a certain section, there will be timestamps down along the bottom, hopefully using YouTube's new timestamp system. And I think that out of the way, let's just get into part 1. Why am I creating a custom map? Well, probably if I'm completely upfront, if any of you follow the channel, you'll be aware that I've recently been playing a series called The Divide, and I was really happy with the way the series was going. But one of the constant feedback I was always getting is about the fact that my logistics wasn't very good. So I started thinking about what I wanted to do for a new series, and I thought what I wanted was a map that I could still present a challenge and an interest, but at the same time will really allow me to work hard on my logistics and have a reason to work hard on my logistics, which is quite important. And what I did was I spent quite a long time going through the workshop looking for maps, and I found some very good maps, but none of them actually fitted what I was looking for, is probably the way to say it, because I had a very distinct vision in my head of what I actually wanted to do. In the end I decided that I had to make a custom map, and that's the reason why I made the custom map. Now moving on to section 2. Now this will get a little bit technical and I apologize in advance, and it's not, probably won't go down into the depth of what some people who want to create their own customs maps will want, but hopefully it will point you guys in the right direction, because if I draw the mini map up to full size, you'll see that this has got quite a complex coastline, because I wanted islands and waterways. Now to create this from scratch would take hours, and I can vouch for that because I did try when the terrain editor was brought in. One of the quick ways that you can really give yourself a bit of a leg up is by actually going out on one of the free terrain applications, which will give you a terrain map. That's what I actually did. In fact, well, I did it a long time ago, because this map is actually based on the islands and waterways around Stockholm, but though people probably won't recognize it. And I actually got the map from Terrain Party. Now when you bring these maps in, they can be a little bit haphazard when you get them in the workshop, and plus the fact I didn't really want to use the map as default. So what I did is I took the terrain map that I downloaded, I then put that into a graphical packages. I actually use Adobe Photoshop 4, but you can use any graphics package as long as it supports layers. And you don't need the latest application if you can find an old one. I mean, there's free graphics packages which you can do this with, so you don't have to spend any money. So what I did is I imported the terrain map into Photoshop, and what I did was I kind of worked on the islands and shapes to get the basic shape of what I wanted to look. What I did is I kind of filled in a few waterways, created a few other ones. There was no hills on this map, it was literally a kind of flat terrain. And I worked on that until I got roughly the main structure that I wanted to do. Then what I actually did was I opened up Workers and Resources, I went down and I used the terrain editor. Don't use the one where it asks you for the picture and the title. Always work in the terrain editor, because you can save that as a separate file and work on it as long as you want, and then when you're ready to publish the map you can then go and create it as a map item. And what I did is I brought it into the workshop terrain editor, and it was awful because there was spikes all over the places, partly because of my editing and partly because sometimes when you bring in terrain maps it doesn't really fit, and also parts of the map had actually gone underwater. So what I actually did, because I wanted to do extensive editing, now please bear in mind that if you're just wanting to bring in an area which you want the area to look like it is actually in real life, what you can do is just adjust it and to the point where you can just use it as default. But if you want to create a completely custom map like I did, what I did is I took it back into Photoshop. In case you're not aware, when you're in Photoshop you work in grayscale. Maximum height is white and the depths of the ocean are black, so you've got a grayscale between black and white. Also, another thing you need to remember is when you're working in graphical packages, for some reason the map is actually flipped. So what you'll find is that the bottom is the top. Got no explanation why the map is flipped, but it just is. So be aware of that. And what I did is I created a grayscale which fitted with the terrain editor, so that I ended up with a completely flat map, but with all the coastline defined. If any of you are not sure what I'm talking about, is if you actually go into the workers and resources and just load up the default terrain editor, what you will get is a flat area with a little lake in the center. And that's what this map looked like at one point, but the difference was is it had all the coastlines. And I had the Photoshop open and I had workers and resources open, and I was literally editing all around the coastline, creating waterways, putting lakes in. I wasn't worried about the terrain features, and because I wanted to get all the coastline kind of set up properly before I did anything. And so what I did was I just kept flipping backwards and forwards. What I'd do is I would edit it in Photoshop, then save it as a PNG file, import it into the workshop, and then take a look at it and go around and see what its points is. And at one point, because I've got two monitors, I actually had one on each monitor, so I could actually see what was going on. So I could look at the workshop version and see where some of the problems were. Once I got the coastal outlines settled, I then wanted to put in hills, because the original map didn't have much in the way of hills down the bottom, and plus I wanted this. So what I did is I found another terrain map which I downloaded a long time ago. Well, I think it's when I actually created the custom map for the Great Divide. And then what I did was I cut out sections of hills, and then I posted those in the graphical package as different layers. So what I did is I built these mountains up as layers over the top, and of course when you save it as a PNG file, it flattens and gets sent out. And again, and then what I started doing was repeating the process I'd done for the coastline for all the hills, by flipping backwards and forwards between the graphics package and the terrain editor. And eventually I got the hills not perfect, but they were all roughly in the shape I wanted them, the height I wanted. It all looked like pretty well. I mean, doing these islands up here was a little bit tricky. And once I got to the point where I was happy with the coastline and the hills here, well, what I wanted to do then was introduce some flat terrain into this area here. Now, the way I actually added some of this terrain around here is a little bit difficult. And this is why it's important that you actually use a graphical package with layers in it. Because what I did was I created a new layer between the water and the flat ground, which was at the bottom, and the hills, which was at the highest level. So I created a layer between the two, and then what I did is I then imported in the Stockholm terrain layer as I downloaded it. Then I found areas of flattish terrain that had some fairly useful contours on it. And what I did then is I literally pasted bits and pieces into this area here to get this kind of rolling terrain here. And because the way layers work is that the bottom layer is overwritten by the middle layer, which is overlaid by the top layer. So like when I was doing this area here, I could put a whole set of hills into here, and then when the mountains came out on the top, these two layers were hidden under the hills and mountains down here. And similar as before, what I did then was I flipped backwards and forwards between the graphical package and the terrain editor until I got the map roughly into the shape that I wanted. Now, I'm not going to claim it's finished, because the grayscale in the graphical package is too coarse for the editor. But eventually I got to the point where I was happy with what I'd done with the overall structure. It took me about 2 days to do it, but I can guarantee you that is still a lot quicker than trying to create it from scratch. And then once I got the map to the point where I actually liked it and done that, I then spent a certain period of time putting in some of the more detailed features, like if I say over here. But this was all done in the terrain editor. So like I put a little bit of swampland in here. I've also, I think I tidied up these mountains over here. Kept working at it. Now bear in mind that when I was doing this, there was no trees on there, there was no resources. I'd wiped them all out. I was just working purely on the terrain. What I would suggest is when you are editing the map, do use the topographic, because it gives you a far better feeling for the shape of the ground than the wireframe. So if you put the wireframe on, see, the wireframe gives you hints of high ground, but not the topographic ground. And if you actually edit things, I'll try and do it here, but it's not really the best way to do it. You can see you can kind of chase, so you can literally shape the contours just like that as well, like that. Too much into that because it's gonna that's not the purpose of this video. We just turn off the topographic again, and I think that's where I'm going to stop, because it is quite a complex process and you do need time and patience. What we're going to do now is move on to the final part of this map, and it's probably what most of you are here for. Now this map is called the 7 Crosses. If I draw the map up really big, the reason is there are 7 locations on the map marked with a church and cross dirt roads. There's one down here, there's one over here, this is 2, so it's kind of tucked in here. Some of them are actually medium-sized cathedrals because I wanted something with a little bit of drama. There's a third one is here. This has just got a small church on it. And then there's one here. This is the 4th one here. This has got a medium cathedral. And then I've got another one out here, because the challenge of this map is to build a town on every one of these 7 locations and then connect them up into a self-sustaining logistics system. And I think that's going to be the real part of the challenge. Just show you the last 2 over here. So we've got one here, one here. So that's the final location. You can see they're all scattered on the map. They're intentionally away from the mainland except for these 2. So the idea is to present a challenge by actually connecting up these islands and supplying the resources. Now, before I talk about the resources, I'm just going to show you the starting locations. So this is what you'd call the main connection. Also had a bit of fun here. I couldn't resist the temptation of actually putting the rail on the road through tunnels. There's another minor connection over here, and it's just in this corner here. And this was just put in for a little bit of fun as well, and also to give an alternative power supply. Then up here, there's a slightly more substantial connection with a rail link, but of course this, with me being me, I had to put it on the other side of here. So effectively, there's not really enough space here to build a town. So to get this connected, you're going to have to build bridges into here, or if possible, you can build a port in. And part of the reason for putting this out here is to provide an possibility of using the helicopter construction offices. Now, the NATO connections there's one here, which you could say is probably the main connection. This is the big one, and it goes out through here. And then, just for the fun of it, if I come up to here, I put another minor connection in here, and I don't know if you can actually see it because we can't see on the map. I just put a little bit of a port down the back here, just for the fun of it. I mean, the port's totally impractical. Now, I have play tested putting ports a fair distance inland. In fact, I did play test putting a port all the way down here, but I will give you a bit of a warning that yes, the water is deep enough for the ships, but when I did the play testing, the ships actually had a little bit of a problem getting in and out of some of these channels. So I wouldn't recommend building ports down here unless you want a little bit of frustration. I think I would recommend that if you're going to build ports, put them up on the top edges of the map up here. One, you're going to get a far shorter distance to the actual borders. Give you an idea that a ship from here going to the Soviet border, I think it took a couple of months just to get out of here through all the waterways, because it kept twisting and turning. It makes very slow progress. So if you want to use ships, I recommend that you don't build them in these in-depth waterways. I think just to wind the video up now, where I'll just turn off the names, and I'm just going to show you the resources. We'll go through the normal processes. Now, the resources are plentiful, but they're deliberately positioned again to tie in with this logistics theme. So the coal is down here. We've got a big patch of coal here and another little patch over there. But the iron, there's only one location of iron, but there's quite a lot of it. And you can see it's near the coal, but not so near that they're going to be on top of each other. And the reason for placing the iron there next to the coal is that if you're going to be shipping out steel, you're going to have a really strong logistics network, probably based on rail, to get out here to do the building. The oil's in 2 locations, simply because I built this swamp area here, which I've already highlighted, just for the fun of it. And then I thought, well, I wanted to put a bit more oil in, and I didn't think it would fit here. That's the reason why I've put another patch of oil up here, and it's in an interesting enough position to kind of ensure that no one's going to really substantially exploit the options. The uranium's in a single location here, again on this little island here. It's really been put here just to give a reason to make connections to this island. And if I mean, there's enough uranium here to run a couple of power stations in theory. So hopefully that will work. Now, bauxite gave me a little bit of a problem because I wanted bauxite in a position so that I could use it to build aircraft, but at the same time as I didn't want it down in this area. So what I did in the end was I opted to put it up here, simply because I think this island's big enough to support a possible aircraft industry. Also, one of the 7 points is here. So that's the reason why I've put the bauxite up here. I think it could be quite fun to build a massive aircraft production area on this island. Now, just to wind up, I'm just going to talk about gravel. Now, there's lots of gravel down here, and I know some of you will look at it and say, well, this is a starting position. You're making it very easy. And to a certain degree, yes. But be aware that all the gravel is down around these areas here along the mountains on this side. But the further north you go, the less gravel you're going to get. So you can see here, so the hills here are actually outside the border, so you can't get to the gravel. Once you get into the main map, there's a little bit of gravel here, which I've put in, but it won't be particularly that easy to mine. I think I've put a little bit patch here as well, because I wanted a kind of rocky lake put in here. But once you start to move out into the islands, there's very limited gravel. There's a little bit here. I think this is one of the last bits, but if you come right out onto the islands themselves, you'll see there's virtually no gravel at all. And this again ties back into the logistics theme, that if you're going to get out here and build the roads, you're going to have to really try and ship the gravel when you've got little fringes like this. But getting enough gravel out here for a major gravel industry is going to be a little bit difficult. And that is the introduction to the Seven Crosses map, and I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you found it interesting. If you've got any questions about the map and also the process that I did to create the map, feel free to chuck it in the comments and I'll try and answer them the best I can. So until next time, whatever you do, enjoy your gaming.